Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we are diving into how online payment works. The moment you click pay until the merchant receives the money. Then we'll go into how traditional banking systems handle online payment. And then we see why is it so hard to scale the traditional core banking systems horizontally. So to understand online payment, we need to know what is core banking. Core stands for centralized online real-time environment. It's a platform that manages main functionalities of online banking and keeping the ledger that is the single source of truth. So online payment is done in several phases. And here we are going to discuss the three main phases of online payment. The three main phases are authorization, clearing or clearance, and settlement. To discuss these phases, we need to know about online payment vocabulary. The issuer is payer's bank. The acquirer is merchant's bank. The merchant is receiver of the money. And network means Visa or MasterCard. So here's the difference between clearance and settlement. Clearance is the process of calculating, verifying, and agreeing on the amounts owed between parties, while settlement is the process that actually we move the money between banks to complete the transaction. So in authorization phase, the issuer validates card info and reserves the paid amount to prevent the payer from double spending the same amount of money in database. It doesn't touch the current balance, but it reduces the available balance. This phase begins when the payer clicks on the payment and ends when he receives the fail or success message. The clearing phase is when the merchant sends the batch of payments in a period of time, and usually it's at the end of the day. And all fees and interchangeable amounts are calculated, and banks will know how much they owe each other, and they will accept that amount of money that they should pay to each other. In the settlement phase, the money is really transferred. The bank's reserves get updated in central bank, and merchant receives the total money. Note that settlement phase is aggregated. So here's an example of the flow. For example, consider Bob's account balance is $1,000. Bob's bank name is A, so here issuer is A. And Bob tries to pay $100 to Alice via online payment system, and Alice's bank account balance is 0. Alice's bank name is B, so acquirer here is B. And when Bob pays Alice via online payment, the phase 1 begins immediately after the user clicks on the pay button, and finishes when the user receives success or failed message. Phase 1 is the moment user pays, and this phase is synchronous and is executed per payment. Bob's current balance is still $1,000, but issuer holds $100, so Bob's available balance will be $900, and $100 is temporarily locked. After phase 2, usually runs end of the day and is in batch, and runs periodically and is asynchronous. For example, merchant sends a capture file to the acquirer, and the acquirer sends a capture file to the network. Network calculates fees, how much banks owe each other, and other info to both issuer and acquirer. Issuer turns the hold into a final transaction and takes the $100 from Bob's account. Now Bob's current balance is $900 as well. When the phase 3 begins, it usually runs the day after payment and is in batch like clearing phase, and runs periodically and is asynchronous. Network aggregates all debts and tells central banks that A owes B $100. Then central bank adds $100 to bank B's account and takes $100 from A's account in central bank. Central bank only moves net amounts between banks, not per transaction. Both acquirer and issuer finalize the transaction, and acquirer adds $100 to Alice's account. Now Bob's balance is $900 and Alice's balance is $100. So here's an overview of authorization phase, and is done when we see the result of the payment. In this phase, cardholder pays some amount of money, and then the merchant sends card ID info and his info with pay amount to acquirer. The acquirer forwards the request to network, and network routes the request to issuer. Issuer checks validity of the card, then checks balance and fraud rules. Then it reduces the payment amount from available balance, and then holds that amount of money with an expiration time for the reserved money. This mechanism will make sure that the payer will not double spend that amount of money. Then the issuer sends the approve message, and the success message will be shown to the user. In the clearance phase, the merchant sends a capture file including all transactions. These transactions are all that are received in the period of time. The time acquirer sends that info to the network, and network calculates how much each bank owes the acquirer and computes interchange, network fee, and other amounts that acquirer and issuer should know, and sends the clearing files to acquirer and issuer. And as you see, the issuer really takes the money from payer here and converts the hold into a transaction and reduces payer's balance. This phase might take 1 to 3 days to begin. In this phase, the network calculates total amount of all debts and credits that banks owe to each other. So for example, Bank A must be credited $9,000 and Bank B must be debited $9,000. The network sends this aggregated data to the central bank Central bank updates bank reserves and updates these reserves and then notifies these banks at the end. So the acquirer knows that its reserves have been updated. So he finishes the transaction and credits the merchant's account. Here we will have an overview of main tables that banking systems use for online payment. So accounts store accounts info, and balances store the history of current and available balances for every account. We have transactions table and ledger entries. Ledger entries is an append-only table that is the source of truth in the banks. And here we have holds or authorizations table that is for temporary reserves that we keep to prevent the payer from double spending. Settlement batches is for keeping track of settlement files that banks receive. And we need another table called Idempotency. That is a table to make sure every transaction is processed only once and not more. So here is the most important fields of major tables that we discussed. Note that every bank have its own implementation and details are different between banks, but the overall architecture is the same. So one important thing here is that available balance is equal to current balance minus the sum of all holds that their status is pending. Also note that transactions track intent, holds reserve money, and the ledger records fact. And what do we mean by that? The ledger is append-only record of balance changed. So if it's in ledger, it's important to know that money has really moved. Transaction records the life cycle of a payment, whether it's initiated, paid, or completed, and hold reserves funds so users can't double spend money. It doesn't change the read balance. So the advantages of this architecture are it has a strict asset compliance. Also, it is easy to generate reports of how much money has moved in a time window for regulators. This is an important matter. This system has high consistency to guarantee that events won't happen. But we have serious disadvantages here. For example, horizontal scaling is really hard, and I will tell you how we can do it. But it's not impossible. Cross-account transactions are expensive, and we will dive deep into why it's so expensive. And we have availability and single point of failure problem here. Because if the database goes down, we are not able to pay or receive money. And that's a real problem. So, what about scaling problems? To scale this architecture, we need to shard the database based on account. The vertical ceiling for hot row is, for example, we have a merchant involved in so many transactions. For example, like Amazon, that we have to lock Amazon's account and Amazon's balance for every transaction and for every payment that users pay in the site, that makes payments of Amazon accounts so inefficient and slow. Also, sharding database makes banks use two-phase commit. For example, if payer's data is in server A and receiver's data is in server B to execute transactions that comply by ACID principles with high consistency, we need to coordinate these servers to make sure data will not get corrupted. This coordination makes transactions costly. And we have global latency and vs consistency. And what's that problem? If a user is sending money from Europe to a user that is in United States, in that case latency increases. And another matter is what if one shard gets much more traffic than the others? We can't guarantee even load across shards, and one shard may have bank accounts with much higher user. So how do we scale this system? To scale this system, we need to use sharding or account. In sharding, we divide the accounts table into several partitions and put every partition in a different database server. Note that sharding is somehow partitioning, but the difference is in sharding we put every partition in different database server. So here I will discuss two-phase commit and tell you why is it so costly to use two-phase commit in distributed databases. So to show you why is two-phase commit costly, I will show you how this protocol works. In this protocol we have a coordinator with two participants. So coordinator tells the participants to prepare and they log the rows involved in transaction. Then after preparing all participants, the coordinator tells them to commit. As you see, all participants and coordinator has to log these rows for a long time before prepare step, and only unlocks these rows after they commit. So it makes the protocol really costly because some rows are locked for a really long period of time. So that's the traditional payment flow and why techniques like two-phase commit become painful at scale. In the next video, I'll break down how neobanks redesign this architecture and what they do differently under the hood.